Let's talk cooling. Refrigerators? Yes. Deep freezers? Absolutely. Air conditioning units? You better believe it. These are all big noisemakers for us on set, especially on locations or on stages or basically anywhere, to be completely honest, because they always, no matter how much we seem to turn them off, they seem to pop up out of nowhere. And it could be because a crew member is like tired of working in 90-degree temperatures on a stage because the gaffers set up a whole bunch of HMIs and everybody's burning up. Or it could be that when the sound mixer and when you as the boom operator or utility were walking around set, it was cycled down at that time. And you didn't hear it until it went quiet and you've done 4 or 5 takes and all of a sudden, and where did that noise come from? And then you start looking all over the place and you find that there was a hidden refrigerator in a cabinet inside of someone's house. And what's the purpose of it? It just happens to be a hidden cooler for no real reason. Maybe it's for the dad of the house to hide a 6-pack of beer. I don't know. All I know is that those things are very annoying, but for some reason they're becoming more and more commonplace. So let's talk about some refrigeration that we run into on set and some solutions we can come up with for those. If you are doing a tech scout and you have a restaurant that you're dealing with, find out what can turn off. Most of the time, they'll say a deep freeze is not going to turn off. Deep freezers are where they basically store a lot of big things, and they say this cannot possibly go off. This is where most of our product is. Our seafood can't be unrefrigerated. It's going to all die. Our meat, if that goes bad, bacteria is going to creep. Anyway, they have their reasons, and they always love to tell us about them. I'll spare you from that because I'm sure you've heard it many times over. But what you can do if you have refrigeration and heater and freezer units closer to set is you can ask them to relocate that stuff into the deep freeze before you are there on set. That's one of those things that helps when you are doing a tech scout to mention in advance. Make sure that you write in your notes and send those notes to the producer, locations people, all those people that need to know this kind of thing. Because when you show up on the day, you don't want to have all of these freezers right there on top of your actors on set that are talking at the bar. I can't possibly shut all this stuff down. And relocate all the meat products in there because your crew members are all over the place. If we would have known in advance, you did know in advance. That's the reason why you get this note to the producers and you get it to the locations people so they know to relocate all the stuff back. On that note, the plugs that they are plugged into, it is very important for the gaffer to know you are going to be shutting off those plugs. If you cannot pull out the refrigeration units like the freezers and turn off and unplug the units themselves. This is important because if the gaffer starts plugging in lights, or let's just say that they happen to have this really artistic set piece that has candles going up through all the bar bottles and stuff, and they put a rope light through it all, and yes, this has happened to me, they're going to say, well, that has to be powered from someplace. Well, can you run a stinger from someplace? I can't. It makes more sense for this, and you would see a stinger coming in from someplace. I don't want excuses. I just want a solution. The solution would be to kill that outlet for us, but they need it for a light. So guess who's going to win? The gaffer, because they have the DPs on their side, and they're going to say, and the DPs say, well, I need this. It looks so beautiful. And the producers and everyone's going to say, yes, it does. It's going to stay in there. Sound, can you just deal with it? They somehow seem to think that we have a magic button we press and all the sound goes away. I still am looking for this magic button, and if I ever find it, I will do a whole series on sound speeds about it. Let me put it that way. However, this is one of the reasons why you need pre-rigging, because pre-rigging is going to be one of those things that a gaffer is going to basically go out there, look at the location, say, this is what we need to do, and the best boy and their team is going to come up with a solution for that. Pre-rigging is important, though, because they're going to go ahead and run lights and, basically hide certain lights in the ceiling, tape over the cords that would be in plain sight. So that way it's the color of the wall and you don't really notice it. But they're going to do all that kind of stuff in advance. And without pre-rigging, you could get caught on something like this. So insist, if there's a lot of refrigeration units, that you pre-rig, that your gaffer is allowed to pre-rig simply because of that. You don't want to get caught. Now, the refrigeration units, as long as you can pull them out and shut them down, here's a rule of thumb. Make sure that at least 2 other people know about it in addition to you. Those could both be locations people. Great, but most of the time, the locations people are going to be running around handling the the fuse box and stuff like that, or not the fuse box, the breakers that the gaffer is going to have questions about. Or they're going to be asking, can we possibly set this side room up for the cast to be in? Can we do this? Can we do that? All these different departments on set are going to be asking for something from the locations department. And you are no different. You're going to be asking if it's possible to shut down noises all over the place. And ideally, you want to get one of those people with you before call. So get a pre-call if you're going to be shooting in a location like a restaurant. That's critical because it is not yet noisy yet. As soon as all the crew comes in there, they're going to be working at 5,000 miles an hour, and you're not going to be able to hear jack. So getting your sound department together with locations is critical first thing in the morning, because they will also most likely introduce you to the site rep, who is going to most likely know how to shut everything down. So if you say, this is an issue, this is an issue, this is an issue, this is an issue, all these things are issues, can we unplug those? Sometimes they'll say, no, I have things in there that cannot go cold. Well, that's why you need to say, can you relocate them to the deep freezer in the back? Or at least move them farther away from set. Sometimes there's freezers that are offset. Sometimes if you have a restaurant that has a sister restaurant next door, or you're in a big complex, sometimes there's a reciprocal agreement between companies that are allowing them to share space and do certain things. Like I was in one location in Atlanta, and we were at a restaurant who did not seem like it was going to be able to do a whole lot, but I made a few questions. I inquired a little bit, and they said, oh yeah, we can load up some of our mobile coolers, and we can relocate them upstairs to our refrigerator, or to refrigerators upstairs. Simply by asking, and nobody thought to ask them, can you relocate the product that's inside the freezers? By doing that, they were absolutely able to shut them down. Sometimes you run into a nervous executive chef, though, and the executive chef is not willing to shut things down because they're nervous about, even if you take it out for a few minutes and you don't properly thaw it, whatever else. This is why it's important then to get dry ice. Dry ice and newspapers are one of those things that really comes in handy if you're a sound person. If they say we cannot shut those off because it's going to make everything the temperature is going to raise and all the product's going to melt. Okay, let's get some dry ice. Put thin layers of newspaper all over everything, or tell locations to do this. Get a bunch of dry ice and put them all over the inside of that freezer unit. That way you can kill it and the temperature stays well below freezing. This is also handy if you go into a convenience store and they have all of their glass refrigeration units all over the back. They say, oh no, we can't shut them down, because if we shut them down, the product's all going to go bad and we are going to be losing beer. We're going to be losing, our Cokes and stuff. Guess what? That can all go room temperature. Okay, but you're concerned about that, and therefore the locations department's concerned about that. So what you can do is get some dry ice. Get them to pack it behind the things that you're seeing on camera. And by the time you end up, going and doing all this kind of stuff, it's going to be very cold. The thing is, though, on things like that, or refrigerators at someone's house, when they open up the refrigerator door, what happens? A light comes on. So you need to talk to the gaffer, or rather the DP, and you tell them you are interested in killing the refrigerator. And so since the actors are opening up the refrigerator door in the scene, you might need to have a light in there just to make them aware you're going to be killing it, and stay on top of the gaffer. Make sure that they actually do put something in there, because if they don't, they're going to say, oh, well, it's okay. We'll just turn the refrigerator back on. On a rare occasion, you'll see a refrigerator that has a light that is independent of the compressor and cooling mechanism. In that circumstance, fine. Just identify it. But if you need to turn anything off, note what settings they are on. Some of the older refrigerators have a turn dial that if you cannot possibly pull it out there, and they don't want you to kill the breakers because other lights are being powered off of that. Okay? Well, what you can do in that circumstance is take a picture of what the settings are for the freezer and the refrigerator, anything else that they have knobs on, and then turn them all the way to their coldest possible setting. Right before you roll, turn them all the way off. What that will do, provided no one opens the refrigerator door or freezer door, what that will do is it will cycle down the compressor because it no longer needs to cool. That will usually get you by long enough to do the setups that you have in that direction. As soon as you turn around or change locations, or not change locations, but as soon as you change to a different angle inside of that kitchen or wherever you're shooting, turn everything back wide open, let it completely cool down on the inside of the refrigerator. So therefore, it is rocking like the really cold air in there to make that food very cold. And then you do the same thing, you kill it when it's time. So those are a few other things that you can do if they don't want to use dry ice. They say dry ice isn't necessarily an option. Okay, well, what can we do if we can't relocate the food? In some circumstances, there's something inside of a refrigeration unit, for example, like just a location I was shooting at a couple of days ago. There was breast milk inside of the freezer, I should say, in a kitchen sequence. The refrigerator was extremely loud. Well, we mentioned the location department. We need to kill this refrigerator like it was put on the notes during the Tech Scout almost a month ago. And they say, oh no, the homeowner does not want us to kill the refrigerator. Okay, why not? There's breast milk inside there. Can we take it out? The homeowner says no. Okay, hold on one second here. The homeowner just wants to make sure the breast milk is taken care of. Why can't it be taken out? Because they don't want it to thaw. These are why questions are important. Okay, so what if we were to make someone responsible for it, to take the breast milk out of the freezer, put it inside of a cooler, take it to craft services and put it in their freezer, because craft services freezers are usually kept on like the coldest possible setting or amongst them. The reason why is whenever there's a location move, that food is going to the refrigeration stops and that unit is going to start warming up. So they wanted to be really, really cold. So it's like overly cold. That way you can resist all of the warmer temperatures for at least a while. And when I say warmer temperatures, I mean going from like negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit or even 0 degrees Fahrenheit up to freezing temperature at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. It would take a little while for it to thaw to that point. And by then it's not even really thawed. So by me basically saying, can we have somebody responsible for the breast milk to move it to craft services freezer? Can that happen? We mentioned that as a solution to the producers. The producers loved it because we obviously couldn't get dry ice in time and they didn't want to kill it. So they loved that idea. And guess what happened? The producers simply made an agreement with and said, we will make sure that it's taken care of. They were also concerned about cycling up and down the refrigerator unit, and I took full responsibility of it. Why did I do that? Because it's very easy to pass the puck and say, that should be on someone else. But if I am responsible for something like the refrigeration, the freezer, I'm doing it for sound. That's why I personally don't mind taking initiative and doing that, because if I say, no, I'm not going to do that, I have too many other things on my mind, which is true, that is one of those little things where they're not going to trust me on something like that in the future. Now, what I will sometimes do if I am tired or getting kind of, brain dead at the end of a crazy week is I will do something, I'll change up my workflow, change something that doesn't normally happen in order to remind myself. Like, for example, here's my wedding ring. I try to use a silicone ring when I'm on set, but I always change it out when I'm not at work. However, what I will sometimes do is I will relocate that ring to another finger. That silicone ring I will feel. Or if not, I might add a thin rubber band around one of my fingers, something I will feel and notice and say, oh yeah, that's right. As soon as I hear the air conditioner, as soon as I hear the refrigeration unit when we're rolling, when they say roll sound, there it is right there, I'll know to kill it real quick. Go in there, turn the power off button or whatever, then I'll know it goes off, no problem. But when it comes to turning it back on, you don't want to cycle it on and off too much because that can burn out the compressor and the cooling unit. But what I will do is put a little reminder rubber band or something like that on there that every time I see it, I'll say, why is that there? Oh yeah, that's my cue, because I notice that kind of thing quite often and I'll know to turn it back on. Not just between takes, that would drive everyone nuts and it probably lose more cooling than it would keep. But on circumstances where we have a turnaround and they say, okay, well, we turn around, we have a 20-minute relight, definitely turn it on then. As my rule of thumb basically is if I know it's going to be at least 10 minutes, or if it has been at least an hour, I will try to cycle it on for at least 5 minutes whenever possible. That will help it tremendously. Now, some of the other cooling units that you will run into regarding food and beverage pertains to like wine coolers. Now, those are really annoying because they'll hide them anywhere. They're most likely going to be someplace in a cellar or whatever, but what you will sometimes run into is a hidden one inside of your kitchen in one of the drawers. And if that's the case in like one of these richer houses, then that's going to be kind of annoying. But luckily, there's an on-off switch right there in the front. But again, talk to locations before you do anything. Locations most likely will come and they'll take initiative of that themselves, maybe even relocate it to a refrigerator unit on the other side of the house. Potentially a deep freeze if it's a freezer, well, like right there on set for things like meats or whatever. They'll move them to a different location so that way you can kill that freezer unit too. And that's great. Great. When you want to do that, fine, more power to you. I just want it off. I don't want to hear that during my track. It's it's really annoying when everyone else has everything at their fingertips that they need to do their jobs. Like the DP says, well, let's cover up that light there with tape or, a black wrap or something like that. But you can't say, well, let me cover up this refrigeration unit with furniture pads or whatever, because that's going to be too big. It's going to be in the shot too. You can't just have all these furniture pads and people be like, why is there furniture pads wrapped around a refrigerator unit? That makes no sense. Well, the reason why you would normally do that is because it's needing to be baffled for some reason. That's the reason why you basically use furniture pads on set. So you have a lot of wine coolers, you have deep freezes, you have all these noisemakers there on set, and you want to try to get that stuff as far off of set as possible so you can kill the close stuff to you. In restaurants and bars, shouldn't be that big of an issue. Just identify what they are, and here's a little trick you can also use. If it's noisy and you don't want to walk around with like an MM1 on your side and a boom plugged up to that, headphones plugged into that, and point your microphone at things, what you can do is walk over to refrigeration units and just put a finger on it. Like I'll do this number. I'll just put my hand up against it. And if you feel it vibrating, you know it's on. Now, it could have cycled down because it is an ideal temperature on the inside. Great. But when's it going to turn back on? Just because it's off now does not mean it's going to be when you record. So tell locations you do need that off as well. They may look at that and say, but it's not on right now. It will be, though, as soon as we start rolling. It'll be off for 2 hours. As soon as they say pictures up, roll sound, and action, it's going to come on, and you know it will. So, obviously, if it's there on set, you want it addressed. Another thing to think about is ice makers. Ice makers on set usually sit and don't make any noise until a certain amount of ice is removed from it, unless it's on a timer and it makes ice as soon as it possibly can and repeatedly. However, they're insulated. And those things do get very annoying to deal with because just like a refrigerator or a freezer, they will cycle on at the most inopportune times. However, unless there's a restaurant that is opening in the evening and you're shooting there in the morning and then they have all afternoon to get the place back in order, in that circumstance, then this may not work. But what I'm going to suggest anyway is you talk to locations about relocating the ice and taking it all out of there before you get there. The reason why is ice melts, and all it takes is start to trickle down through the drains, and you're going to start to hear it. And all that little ice melting and trickling and sounding like a little stream, it's running off. It drives us nuts. We're going to hear it, and it's nothing we can put hog's hair on, nor is it something we can really do about unless you want to turn the refrigerator unit back on or freezer unit back on, and then it's going to freeze again, and it's annoying. So ask them in advance if you're doing a tech scout, can you take all the ice out? If they're concerned about that, look, go to the gas station around the corner, spend $20, stock up on ice, and put it back in there when we're done. Then turn it back on. It's that easy. It doesn't take a rocket scientist here to figure this stuff out. But these are solutions you need to be aware of. Now let's talk about refrigeration units when it comes down to things like refrigerating people, or rather air conditioning units. Who are the people that usually have the air conditioning units first on set? Obviously, the director, script supervisor who's next to the director, and the producers in their tent are going to most likely have it first, if not talent themselves. Talent, in all honesty, will have it first because if they get hot, their skin starts to splotch and their makeup may start running or whatever because of sweat. So actors are going to be kept in a climate-controlled environment. However, those R2D2 units or wall units that might be refrigerating them or keeping them cool. I keep saying refrigerating, but might be using air conditioners like that, wall AC units, depending on where you are. Those kind of things need to be shut down. Someone needs to be responsible for that. Can be a sound utility until you need that sound utility to second boom. But how often does that happen? Quite often. So you don't want a sound utility to be responsible for that if at all possible. You want to assign someone, maybe the person who's in charge of watching the cast when they are in that holding tent or holding area. Whoever is responsible for it, you need to stay on top of it. Identify all of those all of those AC units that are around set, and fans. Identify where those all are and make sure they're all shut down. If I take my headphones off when I'm on set and I hear a fan in that direction, I will have already identified it. I know where it is, and I know to go right there and shut the thing down. That's how I will know what there is on set that needs to be addressed. I can say the refrigerator by the producers need to be turned off, or I'll say the DP's R2D2 unit needs to shut down. And in case you're not familiar, an R2D2 unit is like a floor standing air conditioning unit that you have a tube running closer to set. Maybe doesn't run close to set. Maybe there's just a couple little tubes that come out of it and point to blow air onto set. And then you have a vent tube that comes out and will run maybe 10, 15, 20 feet or whatever, hopefully outside into nature someplace. That way it's a vent. It's not going to turn the hot air back into the tent. But that's what an R2 unit looks like. Wall AC units are the same kind of thing. It vents outside and it brings cold air on the inside. And identify where those are, because believe it or not, I've run into DPs that have them right in front of where they sit in the DIT tent on hot summer days and like 100-degree humid Georgia weather. It's right there in front of them, blowing up cold air in front of them. So they constantly are in there with that happening. And so that way they say pictures up, got to kill the unit. First thing that happens is all that condensation on their face from where it's cold is going to start to go away, and they're going to feel the heat inside of their black DIT tent, and they're going to get very hot and cranky. They're going to say, well, trust me, I'll turn it off right before we go. If they tell you that kind of thing and you can't argue with the DP on that, that's when you need to have it in your mind so that way if they do not kill it right before they say action, they say roll sound. Okay, sound speeds, slap the sticks. Okay, kill that AC unit, please. You got to point it out, because if you don't, they won't do it. And if they say we'll do it right as we roll, as we do it, as we say action, I've heard that before. And as soon as they forget to do it, which will not even take 3 takes, as soon as they forget to kill it, that's when I go to the first AD and say, the DP boned me on that. I've been very good about letting him leave the AC unit on to the last minute, but he told me he would make sure it's shut off, and it took not even 3 takes before he forgot to turn them off during a take, and that boned us. And if we're not doing another take because of that, then I'm really boned, because the sound mixer is going to be griping at me for running a set and leaving that unit on, even though I'm powerless to stop a DP on something like that. I may argue with the DP. The DP can make my life very difficult. So it's one of those things where I need the first AD to really lock that thing up and really work with their team, if necessary, to someone to delegate that and make sure someone shuts it down. But my point here is make sure it is shut down. So there's a few solutions for refrigeration on set, air conditioning units, things like that, and shutting those down. They're very, very critical. It's very important for you to, first of all, remove everything close from set, get all of the stuff you possibly can shut off, relocate things back deeper into the restaurant, and if there's a unit that can absolutely not shut down, like a deep freeze, then close that one off, and things like that. Now, one last note here. In gas stations, remember all those glass refrigerator units that usually put soft drinks and stuff like that? If they tell you those cannot turn off, because if they do, they won't turn back on, which I've run into, seems to be a common trend. A lot of people seem to say that. You mean to tell me this is in such bad shape that if you turn the power, if your business lost power, your units would die? That's basically the same thing as what you're telling me, is that if we pull the power to it or hit the breakers, it's the same thing as if there was a blackout and power went out. Well, their main concern probably is going to be their their coolers and stuff like that. Yes, but it's also probably their product. So if you get the dry ice on that, then it's at least going to keep that cold. And then anytime they need to actually have light on something like that, that's a gaffer thing. Gaffer needs to provide lights for any of those units as well. So hopefully this gave you some ideas that you had not already thought of regarding refrigeration units, air conditioning units, freezers, that kind of thing. In a nutshell, here's the thing. Get everything far away from set, shut down everything that you are hearing on set, really look inside of every single drawer, look inside of every single cabinet, walk down halls, because there's a lot of hardwood in these places, and really investigate all the nooks and crannies. And don't even hesitate to take your boom out there and point it around there and listen to it. A lot of the times also, one last note, refrigerators are not necessarily your only concern, because they do have house AC. And there's not normally just one inside of a restaurant. There's multiple thermostats, and you have to know where they're all shut down. And even when they're all shut down, sometimes you'll have an extractor fan or something like that on in the kitchen that vents off of one of the stovetops. And that only shuts down, it's on a timer for 5 minutes after the smoke stops, and you turn off all the fire on top of the stovetop, or whatever the timer happens to be set to. Okay, well, it is what it is, right? Hopefully you're not using that stovetop. And if you have to, it's special effects. And special effects would come out there with some sort of smoke maker or whatever, and you don't even have to worry about the stovetop being hot. Safer anyway, right? That's awesome. But as for the actual restaurant themselves, they usually will have some sort of fan up in the ceiling, and this is businesses in general. They'll have something just for ventilation that extracts out. Sometimes, if you have a drop ceiling, you can take the tile that's on and get that pushed up into the ceiling and throw it up on top and replace it with another tile. That at least means that it's venting not into the business anymore. It's actually venting into the crawl space up above, or the drop ceiling. That is an option, but the better option is to have it killed. But that's not always an option. So what you can do is ferny pads on the ceiling. Just ferny pad the thing up there. Use C-clamps and clamp it around all the edges. But then there's not normally just one of those in a room, so it's kind of annoying. Anyway, these are a whole bunch of different ideas, and I keep coming up with more and more of them, but hopefully I've made my point that refrigeration units are something that needs to be shut down, and you need to be very aware of where they all are. Not just the ones you shut down and are responsible for turning back on. Remember my phrase, pick up and turn on. After every single setup and you're moving on, ask yourself, is there anything I need to pick up? Is there anything I need to turn on? That is the reason why I have that phrase. Pick up would be a plant microphone. If I put down a plant microphone in a car and they say, the scene's over, we're relocating, this car is going to go back to where, whoa, don't move the car yet. I have stuff in there I need to pick up. I need to take that back. As for turning on, don't destroy their product, because as soon as you do, you're going to make enemies with the locations department and forget about getting any refrigeration units shut down in the future. So if you take responsibility for it, take responsibility for it just like you would if your job, I should say, not life, depended on it.
Have a question you'd like answered or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.